special thanks to Mohit for inviting me to the speaker session. And so now talking about my first, I would like to talk about my journey a little. So I was actually when I was in my 11th, and I took sciences. So in that, I did not start with computers. So I had an option between economics and computer science in there. And at that time, I did not like computers that much, and I started with economics. So after the JEE mains and the JEE advanced happened, so after that when I got admission into DTU, so that is I took admission directly in computer science. So a lot of you might know or might have heard of this that despite not a lot of us had computers in our 11th and 12th, but hearing that there's a great scope for software developers out there, so all of us jumped directly into computer sciences, and that's exactly what I did as well. So after I joined computer science, so within the first day of college, I was told that if you want to make something of yourself in this college, the basic thing, something that you should know, that is the very basic thing that you need to know is computer science in the form of. So there are two programming languages. One is C++ and one is Java. So that is when I approached this institute called Coding Blocks. I hope you guys have heard of it. And that's when I joined my first course when I had joined computer science in DTU, and that is when I did my first course, and it was my first introduction to computer science formally. So therein I took a C++ foundations course, and I was introduced formally and very well to all the basic data structures and algorithms. So after about 3 months, when I was done with my course, is when I had, you can say, a basic grip on some of the basic DSA that a lot of few people who actually had the privilege of having computers in 11th or 12th did. So I actually started 3 months behind, and I had a lot of catching up to do. So those 3 months, I believe, I utilized very well. So my path, now talking about the path to product-based companies. So, well, it is a little, my approach to this whole journey was actually very different from other people you might have heard of. So many people that you meet actually say that it's the best thing you can do is actually get into competitive programming as fast as you can. So, although I would say that that is pretty much the fundamental way, or you can say the pretty much standard way of, you can say even the herd mentality of getting into product based companies, but I endorse it only up to a certain level, not completely. So, because although you can get into product based companies, there is a lot that goes after you get into the company. So, your journey just does not stop when you have reached a product based company. There's a lot more that is going on when you reach inside the company. So, so I had a privilege of meeting my friend Abhinav Duggal in college, and he was the one who said that after my 3 months of C++ programming, I had no idea what to do. So he told me that right now you should. At that time he had some knowledge of Java, and he went into Android development, and he was joining the course again at Coding Blocks. So it was a relatively well-known university institute at that time. So, because he was joining it and I had no idea what to do, and I had a good view of coding blocks, so I went ahead with him and did the Android course from there. So, that is when I was formally introduced to software development. So, coding, if you have done some C++ and you do competitive programming, you know how to make an algorithm work. But when you get into a company, into a product based company, you don't have to write those high level algorithms only. So to give you an example, so the company where I was interning, and it was Visa in Bangalore. So something very interesting happened there. So there was a piece of code that I wanted to work on and look at, and therein, so the complexity of the code that was working was approximately n square. So, and the size of n in that problem set was, you can approximately say, 1000. Seeing that problem and due to some of the knowledge of competitive programming, I told my superiors, my seniors there, that I have an idea of how I can make it work in ON. That's when they told me that our time constraint right now is the way we are working with the n square algorithm. It actually fits our time constraint of 1 second. They were supposed to make that function work in 1 second. So although I could improve the function to O of n, it won't make very much sense to do that because the function was already performing the way it should have. And when you're pushing something into production, so when you want thousands, you have billions of users or millions of users using your product, there's a lot of testing that needs to go into a product before you can push it to the users. And what a piece of thoroughly well tested and developed code had already been pushed into production, then it would only take a lot of time and not create any improvement if I reduce the algorithm from ON square to ON. So that is one part of product development, product based companies. When I went into Android development, so that's when I saw there's a lot more code that goes behind just to make something, to just give a platform to your function to work. So as you see, you may write how you can find a palindrome in a string, or you can maybe do other DP algorithms, greedy algorithms. You can do a lot of stuff, but the algorithm is only useful or only as good as long as you can put it onto a website, onto an application, or onto an IoT device, and you can make it work for the user. So making those functions is just a small part of product development. So the larger part is actually knowing how you may be able to set up a server, working with servers in the backend, creating a good front end, at least a satisfactory front end experience. So not exactly a very good front end, but at least a satisfactory experience. You should be able to provide that. Then working with the full stack. I hope you guys know what a full stack development is, or what full stack development is, and what full stack developers are. For that, you need to work with databases also, and all this is what actually comprises software development. It's not just writing algorithms. So that is what I was introduced to during my Android development course. So after that, after having a taste of Android development, so my first project that I did was actually making an Android application for my college. You all know that we have a lot of papers and assignments and notes that go around in the college during exams. So I tried to simplify the process for my friends and actually created an application on Play Store wherein I used to put all the past year papers. So there was no formal compilation. When anyone goes from first year to second year, they don't leave behind a compiled source of information or documents for their juniors to follow. So they have them scattered somewhere and they will leave it to. So what I did was I created an application where the seniors were actually motivated to push whatever content they had, and in the field or in the subject that the content was relevant to, and therein then all the juniors could use the past year papers or the past year notes to make use of them, and it was a really successful platform. And within the first year I had like 2 to 3,000 downloads. So my college actually has around 2,000 students in one batch, and 2,000 students, up to 2,500 students downloaded that app and used it. And you can imagine how pretty big this number of 2,000 students is. And it was really great to see that even I was able to create an identity for myself in those 2,500 students. So within the first year, in such a big batch size, people knew who Arnav Jindal was. So that was really exciting. Now moving on, after I did some Android development, I was told that if you want to get into product-based companies, so that is the advice that my seniors gave me. It was that you need to be good at competitive programming. So, following their advice, I went to this platform called HackerRank. And in HackerRank, I started solving at around 2 to 3 years back. They actually had weekly or monthly competitions. So I started taking part in those. But they were actually, the level of questions was below CodeChef. So it was at that time a good website to start with. And after performing for working on that website for like 3 months, I was able to get, so there was a concept of medals there. So I got two around bronze medals, then a silver medal. And after that, I was a little bored of competitive programming. And at that time, all my friends who had a background of competitive programming were into it for 6 months, while I did my first course and then the Android development course, and then made a application for my college. So they had a very good grip, and I was not able to cope up with them. So at that time, competitive programming, I left competitive programming because I was enjoying Android development more. So after that, what happened was, even then I took part in CodeChef. So since these were like the basics, everyone wants to get a good job, right? So just to fulfill that formality of being at least a little good at competitive programming, I went into CodeChef as well. And after performing a little, since I had a little experience working with HackerRank, now I was able to get a 3-star rating on CodeChef after 2 to 3 contests. So after that, I was a little done with competitive programming for the time being, and I wanted to explore product development. So at that time, I pursued. So this name is repeating a lot in my lecture right now. So I again joined Coding Blocks. So I love Coding Blocks. It's the best university. It's the best course. They offer the best courses that I could have found. So then I did a web development course. So this actually I think was a really great point in my journey as a software developer, because I although I knew what Android development was, so anything and everything that you will see around yourself is eventually connected to a server. So although you can make an Android application, each thing is essentially connected to a server with which, so for you need to know how to write a server. If you want to become a full stack developer and you say that I know Android completely, I won't, sorry, but I won't completely agree that you're a full stack developer. You need to know something about how to deploy at least even a simple server that can work with a database in the end. And yeah, so no UI there, but at least it should be connected to a database and should be able to serve you an API. So it should be able to act as an API. So that's how the web development course helped me. So they gave me a great foundation in how you can deploy or work with basic servers, then how you can make APIs and integrate the databases in the backend. So with that knowledge and also the language JavaScript. So web development, I pursued it in JavaScript. I use Node.js for my development. And so because of JavaScript is like, so in the industry, predominantly Java is used. And the second language that I'll say is the second most frequently used language, in my opinion, would be JavaScript. Because somewhere, if you're not working with Java, you're writing a server. So you are essentially working in JavaScript. So that is a good base to have in. And even the front end that you usually work with, if you're working with JavaScript, or so you may have heard of React, Vue.js. So a lot of these front-end libraries, front-end frameworks work with JS. So it's great to if you can have a backend, if you have some formal knowledge of JavaScript. And even in when you go in the industry, as I said, you need a base to be able to write servers. So JavaScript is a great language to have a knowledge in. So after I did that competitive of that web development course, so I was able to actually, so that is when I made the best application in my career till now. So I made an application for Google Forms. So what it essentially is that you might have heard of the website Google Forms, but they do not have any Android application on the Play Store. So one day I saw my brother using Google Forms, using the website, and I asked him why not use the application. So he said there is no application, and I was stunned. So I went around and saw that Google did not make an application for whatever XYZ reason they wanted, but they had left something open, which was the Scripts API. So you can actually go ahead and see what Scripts API is. So the Scripts API gives you access or an interface to interact with the Google service. So using that scripts API, you can actually interact with whatever your Excel sheets, your forms, or whatever Google Docs you have. So you can actually interact with the data that is stored in your Google Drive. So using that, I created an interface. So here you can see the Google server. Then in the middle was my app script, and then in the front end was my Android application. So using that, I was able to create, you can say, a bridge between the website and an Android application, and that is currently on the Play Store right now. It is called GForms, G-FORMS. It's on the Play Store, and it has right now 100,000 downloads. And so the downloads are from actually 130 plus countries around the world. So that's a great achievement. If you ever go to anyone and you tell them that I have an application with 100,000 downloads and it's working in 130 plus countries with an average rating of 4, so you know that it's a great application by, the developer is really great. And because of this application, so when this application hit 100,000 downloads, I put this information on LinkedIn, and that's when the founder of Dunzo actually connected with me on LinkedIn and offered me an opportunity for a job with their company. So I hope you guys can understand. Just making an application that I made for, I just had a chance to make an application when I was talking to my brother. It later led to, after 1 year, it paid me off by giving me a job opportunity with Danzo. So that is the importance of working with products. So that was really exciting. And so after that also I went on and made a few projects in Android, but Google Forms has been the best application that I've made so far. And after that I did something more interesting. So my teacher at Coding Blocks was Mr. Pratik Narang, and he's rather famous on LinkedIn, and his GitHub profile is also famous. And he's actually very famous because he has a resume website. It's an interactive resume website. So this got really interesting. So I was when I was taking my first course, it was with Pratik Bhaiya, and in there during the first class he showed us his resume. So it is at pratiknarang.com. You guys can go ahead and see his resume. So anyone you come across, they have a pretty standard resume wherein you mention some things, and it's like just a piece of paper that you can go through. It's rather boring. If you have like 1,000 resumes, if you're reading them, it's all just a piece of paper for you. But what he did was something really interesting. He created a website where he had a character like a game. So the entire website was like a game, and in that game you could move forward, and then his resume will be seen. So it started with where he was born, where he did his schooling and education, and after that where he worked. So all this was provided in the form of a game, and it was like a story. So that actually caught my attention in first year. At that point of time, I was like, whether I will be able to create something like this or not, I don't know. But that was pretty startling at when I was beginning my career, when I began at Coding Blocks. So right now, after I did my 2.5 years of programming, so that's when I had an idea. Let's try and make what Bhaiya did. So that's when I made my own website, and it is called arnavjindal.in. So AARNAVJINDAL, arnavjindal.in. So it's my interactive resume website. And how it helped me is that during my interviews, so my interviewer, so while talking to him, and I told him that I have a resume website. So he was very amazed at this something different from all the other candidates. He had interviewed like 100 candidates in the morning. So he was very happy to hear that there was something different about me. So he said, okay, show me your website. So I showed him my resume website, and he was very happy. He was genuinely happy to see something. And firstly, I was able to capture his attention. So with a single piece of paper, you cannot catch someone's attentions. But as you know, so games are the best way to catch the attention of anyone. Because my resume was in the form of a game, he could see my entire resume, and he was interested to see what all I had done, because at each point there was something exciting happening in the resume. At each point there was something different happening, so it caught his attention. And So how it helped me is that during my interview, I felt that it actually, so one thing that will help you in your interviews is being unique, is being different than the other candidates. Because after your interview has gone through like 100 candidates, at the end when they need to finalize, so if they have up to 10 candidates that they want to finalize, and from them they only want to choose 5, so in that time all the 10 names are just some text on a piece of paper. But if you had that resume website, your interviewer will know that okay, this guy did something different and he will remember your name. So I think that actually benefited me, and he remembered my name, and I was lucky to be able to get an internship into Visa that way. So that is one thing. And the other thing that helped me with Android development was that I made an application for coding blocks. So they were moving their platform to an Android application as well. So in that, I integrated some APIs with YouTube, so that you could stream YouTube videos from coding blocks onto the app. And because I had done something very different from my friends, so the interviewers asked the questions based only on my projects. So other people, they only had worked with algorithms and they had just they had just basic projects in their resume, which were like Sudoku solver or something like that. But I had something interesting. So he picked that topic and he asked me questions about how I made it work, or how there could have been difficulties, what the idea of making the different components of it work together. So, although the questions were a little detailed in Android development, but he pushed the interview on Android development, and that was actually my forte. So, that way, so how it helps if you have some projects on your resume and they are rather interesting, what will happen is that the focus of the interview will shift to those projects instead of the conventional computer science topic interviews, or the competitive or the programming questions that they ask. So since you know what you have done in your project, the interview shifts to that project, and there you know what you have done. So you can easily impress the interviewer, and since you know what you have done and you have pretty good understanding of it, you won't get stuck anywhere. So that's why my interview with Visa went really great, and so it was like my second interview. So during campus placements, this was my second company, and just in my second company, I was able to get shortlisted. So I was very happy with whatever I did before my internship. So now is where the actual competitive programming journey of mine starts. So what happened was at Visa is where I realized that I want to do more. I want to be better at programming. So I knew a lot of product development. And so, how my experience with product development helped is that I had a project for which I was given 3 months. Each of my friends had been given a project for 3 months, but they did not have, they only knew competitive programming or basic programming. They did not have an idea of how to make a server work or how to make a front end. So those 2 months, those 2 to 3 months, while they spent all that time working on how to get some frameworks work, I was able to actually finish my work within the first 3 weeks. And the left 2 months and week, 2 months and 1 week I was completely free. And so in that time, I felt like I can work on my competitive programming skills. And that is when I started competitive programming after, you can say, an year and a half. I began with competitive programming again. So during that, I took part in CodeChef, and there were 3 contests. Within 3 contests, I was able to raise my rating from 3 star to 6 star. So so each of my friends was stunned that you were able to. So I took jumps of, you can say, 180, 120, something like that, and in just 3 competitions, I was able to go from being 3 star to 6 star. So after that, I was like, okay, so I've done CodeChef, and now I can move to other difficult platforms. So that's when the best thing happened to me, is that I came across Code Forces. So after being really cocky with my CodeChef performance, I went into Code Forces, and the first competition I took part in was in a Division 2 contest, and this was my first competition. And so in that, you have 2 hours to solve 6 questions. And while the questions were easy, and I could think the logic of the questions, but I was not able to implement the questions properly. So I ended up solving only two questions out of six, and my confidence was completely shattered. So my friends who had like a 5-star rating or a 4-star rating on CodeChef were able to solve three, or you can say even the fourth problem a little bit partially. I solved only two problems, and I was completely devastated. So that's when I realized that CodeChef, while it is a great platform to begin with, it will give you a good grasp on the basic DSA and some advanced DSA like segment trees. But it's not. So if you excel in CodeChef, you cannot say that you're good at competitive programming. The reason being that they have two formats, and one is a 10-day long format, which is where I primarily competed in. The other is a 3 long hour format. So the 3 hour long format is not suitable for anyone, I'll say. If unless you are very dedicated about competitive programming, I would not recommend that you do those 3 hour formats, because the questions are really difficult, and you will end up losing a lot of confidence. So I never took part in those contests. So if you want to start with CodeChef, take part in long challenges, and take part in only them as long as you hit a 6-star rating. Before that, or even 5-star, but before that, I won't recommend you guys to join CodeChef small contest. So code forces, in those 2 hours, I was supposed to write complete code for two problems. So for me, I was thinking that I should be able to write two problems completely. So that's when it hit me. So when you're sitting for interviews, you have just 1 hour, 45 minutes or 30 minutes to be able to code a complete question. So you have to think about the logic and write the code in just 45 minutes. And in that also, sometimes you have two questions. So if any of you guys have interviewed with Google, you might know that they may ask two questions that you have to code in 45 minutes. So that actually happened to me. So that is when I realized that the issue with CodeChef is that you don't get acquainted very well to this format of coding. If you want to be good at coding for these company interviews, especially your product based company interviews, you should be able to solve at least 2 to 3 questions, and for that matter, in code forces, at least three. And if you can solve at most even four, then you have a pretty good chance of getting into a really good product based company. So those product based company being the FANG companies, so Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. So, and the other acronym that you may have heard of, GAFM. So that's Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple and Netflix. So, in those companies, so actually, the format of asking questions is that you have 1 hour, or and in that you have to solve one or two questions, and you need to be able to think on your feet quickly, because there is one more issue with this format, I believe, is that we are used to solving the questions alone, and we are just like, if you're solving questions on any platform, or even while you're practicing, you're just sitting alone, having a piece of paper or a notebook, and you're writing the solution on that, and working with your brain and thinking, okay, I can maybe do this that way. But when you are sitting for an interview, you need to interact with the interviewer. You need to be able to tell him that this is what I'm thinking right now, this is how my mind is working. So that is a complete shift from how you are used to programming. So if you are good at solving those 2 to 3 questions, if you are acquainted with code forces and you can solve 2 to 3 questions in that format of 1 hour or 1 hour 30 minutes, so even with an interviewer sitting with you, and when you're interacting with them, you will find that you are able to solve the question quickly. So once you are acquainted with code forces, what happens is, although you can think logic pretty fast, even if you don't go to code forces, your logic building ability might be good. But the issue comes is when you need to write that entire code down in just 30 minutes. So taking part in these code forces contests helped me get acquainted with this format of quickly writing your code, and that is what helped me a lot. So what happened is, because of this entire competitive programming mindset that I was able to develop during my internship at Visa, so when I came back to my campus and started applying for companies, So there was a company called CureFit. So it's rather very well in the news right now. CureFit is organizing a lot of activities. So they came to the campus, and that is when I saw the advantage of competitive programming firsthand. So therein, they asked me in the first round. So it was a computer-based round. You had to solve two questions in 1 hour, and then they had three interview rounds, wherein each interview round had two questions. So, although I had never done the questions that were in the contest or in the computer contest or during the interviews, I had never come across questions like those. Because I had a good base in competitive programming, I was able to blaze through those questions very quickly. So, even the other interviews, even the other interviewees, so I talked to them and my other fellow friends who were able to get an offer from CureFit. So they told me while they were able to solve the questions, they took their complete time of 1 hour. But what happened with me was even my interview was shocked. So during a session, during an interview with him, so I was able to solve a question for which he had allotted 45 minutes in just 15 minutes. So I was able to do the logic building. Then he had no intention of getting me to write the code, but I was acquainted with writing the code as well, so I finished that as well in just 10 minutes. Now he had 20 more minutes left. He said, okay, now dry run your code. Then we worked on the code a little. That was also done in 5 minutes. Then he said, yeah, I am done with you, but we have 15 minutes what to do. So he said, chalo, let's do one more question. And that also I was able to solve in just in like 10 minutes, I will say. So that is what impressed my team at CureFit a lot. So they could see that I had the important logic building skills and the ability to code quickly. So that is why I received an offer from them, and I feel like it's a great privilege to be part of the CureFit team. And even their offer is really great. So if you are working in the industry, if you know of the industry offers, so their offer is actually, you can say, right now for a beginner in the industry, they have the second or third best offer in the entire Indian industry. That is even counting Google, Microsoft, all of them. Their offer is even better than those companies. So you can see how great this opportunity and this learning experience for competitive programming for me was. And even after getting that offer, I did not let myself go. And because I had started enjoying competitive programming, I saw what wonders it could do. And I moved ahead and did some more. So after pursuing competitive programming a little more, is when another opportunity struck me. So there is a company called Shopee in Singapore, and so a recruiter from that company actually contacted me, and I interviewed with their company, and I was able to get an offer from Shopee Singapore. And the offer value, you can say the CTC is around 45 LPA. So that was just because of competitive programming. And because I had posted that I was able to achieve a certain level in competitive programming on Codeforces and CodeChef, so that is when the recruiter contacted me. So LinkedIn does make things happen for you. And another interesting thing that happened was there is a robotics company that is currently working in Bangalore, and they have another branch in Switzerland and another one in Japan, Tokyo. So so because of my performance and posting my achievement on LinkedIn, so I was contacted by them as well, and so I'm interviewing with them as well right now. So and all this because I was able to get a good profile in competitive programming. So due to LinkedIn and all these efforts in competitive programming and product development, I was able to get, you can say, three offers, two of them being international. And even other times, you can say that LinkedIn helps you because if you have some recruiters from companies like Facebook, Microsoft, or Amazon, and if you're connected to them on LinkedIn, they will actually, seeing your profile or seeing your achievements, they will actually keep a track of you. And it may help in getting a message from them. So I actually contacted someone from Google as well this way. I directly messaged a recruiter from Google via LinkedIn, and got in touch with her, and I was able to like interview with Google as well because of all my achievements. So all these experiences were able, I was able to get all these experiences and all these achievements, you can say, were all because of competitive programming. And so not only competitive programming but also product development. So if you guys are looking to get into the industry, and so there are two ways, right? So one is completely getting into competitive programming within your first year up till your up till your third year or fourth year. You can completely give yourself to competitive programming. So that is one way of making things work for you and getting into product based companies, because if you are into competitive programming, you will be able to solve the questions from companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google very easily. So that will help your case if you're into it for 4 years. And the other scenario is like mine. So you can work on product development as well as competitive programming. So, although there are pros and cons of both the approaches, I took the second one, as you know, and I am pretty happy with it. So, if you think that competitive programming alone does not entice you enough or does not keep you gripped into programming that much, then I think my approach might actually help you be interested in into programming and like get you a long-term career in it. So those were the two approaches so that you can do. Now, so the another question that I have often is, what about competitive programming? So for competitive programming, there is no shortcut as such. So the approach that I recommend everyone is, if you're starting with programming, the best thing that you can do right now is to get a course from any institute that you like. So I personally prefer Coding Blocks. You can check out their website. So a course in the very beginning, although it costs a little bit, it will cost you, but the experience of going through a formal education initially with an institute will actually do two things for you. Firstly, you won't lose interest because you're not able to keep a proper track of where you need to go or where you need to study, what you need to study. So that's one way these courses help. The second way is that they will actually help you understand all the important concepts in a time frame that is a lot more, that is a lot less than what you will do if you go by your own. So I've heard people say that we went to YouTube, or there are other platforms like Coursera. They tell me that we went to that platform and we were able to learn ourselves. We don't need institutes. So I tell them, yeah, you're right. So not everybody needs an institute, and I'm not saying that these platforms are not good or you should not go with them. What I endorse is that if you think that, firstly, if you need discipline in your study, so some people have a great self-discipline and they can go with these YouTube courses. But if you think that you lack discipline or initial interest in programming, then I would request you to actually go ahead and do a course, because that way there is a disciplined approach wherein you need to give 2 to 3 hours every week or every twice every week, and you have a lot of focus, and since you have also paid some money, so you feel like it's an obligation to actually complete the course and give it your best. So that is one thing it helps with. Secondly, now that if you go with YouTube courses or Coursera courses, you might take 6 to 9 months to understand the basics properly. So properly being the keyword here. But if you go with a course, it will take you 3 months or something. So that's a lot of time saved, 6 to 3 months. So you can do a lot in that time. And in your 4 years of college, saving those 3 to 6 months is crucial. So that is one recommendation. The second part is that I recommend people to, after doing these courses or along with these courses, go for Geeks for Geeks. So that's like a great website, because the array of questions, because the type of questions, the variety of questions they have there on each topic is really amazing. So if you can go there after you're done with your courses, I recommend you guys to actually solve around 10 to 15 questions of each type. So if you do that, then your knowledge, so firstly you will be able to complement your knowledge that you got from the course, and also your understanding and your grasp on the subject will become more, because when you go for solving those questions by yourself, you actually improve a lot, and it is a practical implementation of what you've learned. So that is also really important. Now, after that, after you're done with the course and GFG, that is when I recommend people to actually go into CodeChef. So, going into CodeChef, I recommend people to stay there and only do long challenges for as long as you get to a 4-star rating. Because as long as you can get to a 4-star rating, so if you're at a 4-star rating, you know that you have mastered the basic DS very well, basic algorithms and DS, and it's time for you to move on to something more competitive, because although your knowledge for DSA is complete, you should be able to compete in a frame where you have just 2 hours to solve a lot of questions. You need to challenge yourself more. So after you're done with CodeChef, after you have reached a 4-star rating, I recommend people to actually move on to Codeforces. So there's also another approach that I recommend if you have less time. If you think you do not have enough time to go to CodeChef, no issues. You can leave CodeChef. CodeChef is actually not that important. So it's like a cushion before Codeforces. So if you don't think that you have the time or the need for that cushion, go directly to Codeforces. And in Codeforces, Codeforces is the best platform that you can go to. You compete with around 12,000 people from around the world in each contest, wherein you get a rating, you get a ranking, and even a slip of. So if you give a wrong answer, so that reduces your points by 50. If you have a slip of just 1 or 2 minutes in submitting, you will see your rank drop by 100. So the type of competition that you get there is really amazing, because it will teach you two things. So first is being able to code and create logic in a short span of time. The other thing you will be able to learn is how to handle pressure. So when you're interviewing, this is something that is not put into a lot of focus, is that there's a lot of pressure on your mind. So when you're doing Codeforces, that pressure of constantly trying to be up, of your rank falling down, maybe giving a wrong answer. So it helps you get into that mindset of interviewing. So that is something that is not talked about enough, but that is really, really important. So that's how Codeforces will help you. And so the next follow-up question that I often get is, now we went into Codeforces, we went into competitive programming with CodeChef, but we could not perform very well. So in that scenario, I actually tell people that so how to improve even after going to these website. So the issue that people don't pay a lot of attention to and should focus on is that although you took part in the competition, you were able to solve 2 to 3 questions. Now, what after that? So, the importance of these competitive programming platforms is what you do after the contest is over. A lot of people will solve those 2 to 3 questions, be very happy, and then leave. But the people who, after each contest, go to the questions that they were able to solve, because you may have solved a question, but that may not be the best approach to solve that question. So in some cases, if you solved in an n square approach, there might be an ON approach there. If you can learn that ON approach, it might not have helped right now, but somewhere in the future it will help you. The second thing is that after each of these contests, one thing is going through the questions that you were able to do and learning from some improvisations that you could have done. The second thing is being going to the questions that you were not able to solve. So if you were not able to solve questions, you see, okay, right, this concept I could not understand it, and maybe this is something that I don't know or I'm not familiar with. Then you can say, okay, chalo, I don't know this concept, so I can leave it for now. That's where the primary mistake lies with competitive programming. After you're done with the competition, you need to go back, see those questions that you were not able to solve. Because if they were based on some concepts that you don't know, it is your place to learn. That is why you take part in competitive programming, to learn from those competitions. So you need to go back, see what the concepts were and what you could not grasp, Then go to other websites, go to YouTube, then search for that concept, learn that concept, then after that solve 2 to 3 questions or maybe even 4 to 5 questions on that concept, so that the next time the question comes and it is based on a similar concept, you are at least familiar with what is going on. Even if you're not able to solve the question, no issues, but you should know what the data structure behind that problem is. And you will find that after 2 or 3 times, even if you were not able to solve the problem, but you knew the concept that was behind the problem, you will see that you can solve the question easily. After maybe even one contest, two contests, you will see that you will improve and you will be able to solve these questions. So that is a primary thing that is important with competitive programming, how to improve in competitive programming. The second thing is consistency. So, so actually, my profile on LinkedIn shot to fame right now. After people heard that I was able to get from 1600, so my rating actually on Codeforces was around 1550 back in December. So from that, in a time frame of 4 months, while I was giving my exams, I'm in fourth year right now, so I have a lot of exams, projects, and interviews going on. So in those 4 months, I was able to go from 1550 to right now my rating is 1930. So I was able to go from a specialist to a candidate master. So that's why my profile shot to fame, and that's where people ask me, okay, so you were able to do this in 4 months. I've seen people struggle with this for a lot of time, still not able to achieve your rating. So the issue with those people has been that they started competitive programming, they took part in a few contests, they were able to reach a rating of let's say 1650, 1700, 1750. What they do after that is they leave it. They relax a little, they think that we have achieved the level that we wanted to. They sit back and relax a little. They give up on competitive programming for let's say 1 month, 2 month, or even if you can say 4 to 5 contests. So that's the second issue that is there in competitive programming. So the issue here is that even if you leave competitive programming for like 2 weeks, so your mind will actually become, you can say, not so, it will become less acquainted to that environment of thinking quickly on your feet, the pressure, being able to handle that pressure. And after that, so if you were on let's say 1600 rating, you were able to work really hard for 2 months, able to achieve 1750, 1800. After that, you gave up competitive programming for 2 weeks, let's say. Then after that, when you come back after 2 weeks, you will find that all the learnings, all the experience that you had is now washed away. So if you don't believe me, try it. You can try it, or you can ask your friends. If you give up on competitive programming for 2 weeks, even if you leave it for just 1 week, you will see that it will have a severe negative impact on your performance and your experience that you gained after 2 months. So the second key point in competitive programming is consistency. So the thing that helped me getting from 1550 to 1930 is not that I'm very special or I'm very smart. I'm just like you guys. So the difference in my approach to the others, who I had some friends who were initially at a rating of 1740, 1750, but now I'm at 1930 and they're still at 1800. So the reason, and the only reason, was consistency. So within those 4 months, there was not even a single contest that I left. I took part in all the contests. And after the contest was over, I went back to the questions, I went back to the tutorial, I saw all the questions that I solved, I could not solve, and understood the approach of the editorial. So the second key point here is being consistent. And the other important aspect and something complementary to being consistent is that while you may have gone through the tutorials and you're learning, the interesting thing, the important thing that you need to do is solve past year questions. So while the contests happen at a frequency of one in maybe let's say 3 days, 4 days, so although that's good, but you need to keep your mind on track. You need to be on your feet. So Codeforces has a great number of contests. So right now they're at their 650th contest. So if you go back, you will be able to find 600 contests that you can go back and solve questions for. So that is something that I did extra. So each day I went back to an old contest and tried to solve 3 to 4 questions. And with those 3 to 4 questions, I was able to finally figure out a pattern in code forces. So there's actually a pattern to these questions. So first is a logic based, second is another simple but a little advanced logic, third is an array based question, and fourth is primarily based on you can say binary search or using sets, and something binary search based logic or log n based data structures. So I was able to grasp that concept, and that I was able to build my thinking along those lines of the format of the contest. So, solving those past contests, I was able to learn a lot about how code forces functions, how the problems are laid out, and a lot of different concepts and interesting things that I could pick up from there. So these three things I will say if you want to get into competitive programming well. So that's what you should follow. Now, just last thing I would like to say, a lot of people want to get into competitive programming, uh, but it's not important to get into competitive programming to get into a good product based company. I have friends who had a great rating of 2300 on Code Forces, and he recently interviewed with Google and he was rejected. So, and I have friends who had a rating of 1700 on Code Forces, and some who did not even take part in Code Forces or any other competitive programming platform. They are right now in Google, and they like went in their first shot. They went there. Even some people who went to Amazon who never formally did competitive programming. So, competitive programming, what is important about competitive programming is that while it will be able to help you with companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, uh, the importance of competitive programming is obviously being able to think quickly on your feet, but the second is that it keeps your mind fresh. So that's the importance of competitive programming, but it's not your only way or your only shot of getting into product based companies. The second thing and the most important thing that the smart people do is that even if they don't like competitive programming, what they will do is they will actually go to websites like LeetCode, Geeks for Geeks, and other such websites, and they will go into the questions that were asked in Google interviews previously and that are ongoing right now. Because what happens is a lot of questions are actually recycled. So I have actually when I was interviewing with Microsoft, so actually I was asked a question that was being asked for 3 years. So they still asked the same question. So that is where people actually be smart. So being hardworking is one thing, being smart is another. So if you just go to these websites like Geeks for Geeks and LeetCode, and if you go into past year company questions, you will be able to find questions that are asked regularly and each year. So if you get a good grasp on these questions, so these questions, even if you're good at competitive programming, there are some questions you still won't be able to figure out in that time frame of 1 hour. But if you have done those questions, you can solve that in 10 minutes. And that impresses the interviewer more than if you have. So if you know those 10 questions well, and you know you can solve them properly in that 1 hour time frame, compared to if you are just, so if you know those 10 questions well compared to if you can solve 10,000 questions well. For the company, what matters during the interview is that you can solve those 10 questions well. So I don't believe that this is a good way, but this is how companies are interviewing. So go to these websites, solve all the past year questions, and make sure that you can, if you're asked a question on those concepts or even some spin-off of those questions, so you are able to solve those questions. So even if you're not good at competitive programming, you can still get into these companies, and especially Amazon and Microsoft. So you can easily crack these companies just by going to LeetCode and Geeks for Geeks. For Facebook and Amazon, Facebook and Google, I do believe you need some experience with competitive programming. But Amazon and Microsoft, you can just go into these companies solving past year questions. So that's all I had for sharing my knowledge with you guys, and I think we can yield the floor open to some questions if you guys have those.
Yeah. So thanks, Arnav. So we'll let the audience ask few questions, and
Sure.
we can end the call then.
Sure.
have any doubts, you can raise your hand. I'll unmute you. Oh.
Fine. Actually, Arnav, hello?
Hello.
Yes, Mohit, go ahead.
Arnav, like, actually, I had this doubt. Like, are there any textbooks which you refer, like, mainly to improve our DS and all those skills?
No, so going to a textbook is actually the worst approach in competitive programming. Sorry for that. But using a textbook, you will learn nothing, because unless you get your hands dirty and you actually implement the code on a platform or an IDE, I think just going through books will not help you, because you need to getting a knowledge or about the logic is one thing, but writing that code down. So there's a lot that goes behind writing the code down formally compared to when you are thinking about the approach or the logic. So the best way is to actually go ahead and code, and not these textbooks. They, in my experience, they have never helped me or my friends who are into great competitive programmers or went into great companies.
Cool.
Okay, there's a student, Prithvi. I'm just unmuting you. Yeah, Prithvi, go ahead.
Good evening, sir. My name is Prithvik.
Hi, Prithvi.
I'm just a beginner in coding. So, what should a beginner do to get the gist or hand of coding for a beginner? I mean, what should a beginner do to do advance himself or level up in this coding world?
So Prithvik, firstly, I'll say, as I said even during my lecture, so I'll say that the best thing you can do is, firstly, if you're a beginner, so I'll recommend that you get a course from an institute if you can. So the best one I recommend everyone is Coding Blocks. So you can go to their website. They have a great online course, and they're even offering a great discount of 50% right now due to this COVID situation. And if not, then you can go for courses on Coursera or YouTube. There are great tutorials by people like Eric To. So if you guys have heard of him, he's a great competitive programmer. He has a great series on programming. You can go for that. And after that course, so the other thing that you should maybe focus on is Geeks for Geeks. So the important things about Geeks for Geeks. So even in companies, so there are three topics that are primarily asked in company interviews. So those three topics are, firstly, arrays, second is strings, and the third one is your trees. So your binary trees and your binary search trees. So if you want to focus on company-based interview questions or company-based interview, that's your main focus. Then these three topics, if you can master these three topics from even just Geeks for Geeks, that is more than enough to get into a good product-based company.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yes, Rohit, go ahead.
Hi Arnav, this is Rohit.
Hi Rohit.
Actually, I lose my mind solving the DP problems. Means, can you tell? Means, I lose my patience also. So, can you tell any approaches solving the DP problems?
So
Dynamic programming problems.
so actually that is a problem that's a trouble with a lot of people. So I'll say even I have this trouble. So there's no set format of DP, but there is one best way. So DP is nothing but, so there are two types of DP essentially. So one is optimization based DP, and the second is you can call recursion based DP. So these are the terms I like to bifurcate DP in. So the first one is actually if you have solved the rainwater harvesting problem, right? So in that you see that there is no essentially DP in there. What you are doing is that you had to go from a position to the left and to the right. So the left you could keep a track of, the right you need to go to. So the optimization is just storing the result for the right in another array before you start traversing from the left. So that is not essentially DP, that's a kind of optimization. The second is recursion based DP. So that is what I want to I want you guys to pay focus to. If you see any question, if it's a DP question, so the first thing, and if you're good at recursion, so the recursion part is actually easy to think of. So when you think of a question, try to think how you can solve this question using recursion. So in recursion, if you have thought of the recursive approach, right? So after that, these recursive DP questions, they are nothing but storing the state that you went to and that might be called again. So there is a hack to these kind of problems. So DP optimization problems, that actually comes with experience. The more problems you solve, the more you will be able to learn. And for these DP optimization problems, I'll recommend you that you guys go to Codeforces and put a filter on the problem set between 1800 and 1400 and solve those questions. So this, you can get a good grasp over DP optimization problems. The second being the DP recursion questions. So firstly, be able to think of the recursion tree or the recursive approach. So you will find that in the recursive approach, there are 3 parameters or 2 parameters that are changing. The rest of them are either these are 2 or 3 are the only parameters that are there, or the other parameters are not changing. So what you can do is then after that, if you identify those 3 parameters, firstly find what the range of those parameters is. After that, declare a global array wherein the dimensions of the array are basically the matrix, you can say 3D array, are the dimensions or the range of those 3 variables. And after that, so initialize all those values with -1. So that is what I do. Initialize that entire matrix, the 3D array, with -1. After that, perform your normal recursion, right? When you're doing recursion, see if the value of that DP. So when you usually work with DP, you see that the solution is between the range of 0 to some positive maximum value. So when you are solved a state once, store that in the DP, then return the result. Otherwise, when you come to a state once, so you can say those 3 variables are actually a state. So when you come to a state, see if the DP table for those 3 values actually has a value other than -1. If it does, then return that value. Otherwise, calculate the value for that state, store that value, and the next time you will see that you can return it. So these 2 ways of DP problems. So if you can get a grasp of these two, so for this Codeforces, for this improve your recursion. If you can do that, then I think a lot of your problems will be solved. So that's how I approached DP.
Oh, thanks. That was very insightful.
You're welcome.
Hi, Arnav. Yeah, so basically you've said about
Sarnesh, be loud.
You spoke about trees, right? As in like the binary search tree and the regular binary tree. But I see advanced trees like segment tree or a Fenwick tree or something like that, not in competitive programming in general, but as a concept as such. Suppose something like a red flag tree or something. So do we have to focus on that? And like if I were to, so how would my path be or something like that? And moreover, aptitude is and logical reasoning is generally a common set of questions that is asked in the written round of interviews. So how am I supposed to type?
Sorry, Sarnesh, but there was a lot of disturbance from your side. So what I was able to get was firstly, what about segment trees? And the second thing was about logic building for these interviews, right? So am I right?
Yes.
All right, great.
Sarnesh, be loud and repeat the question. And I think you're under the fan exactly.
So
Yeah. Nothing. It's just that. So there are advanced concepts in trees, right? Something like an ABL tree or a segment tree or a Fenwick tree. So what would you suggest to go for those trees, like as a starting path? Something that I should follow. And moreover, the logic building for aptitude, like time, board, speed problems, the regular set of questions which you encounter sometimes in an interview for a written test. So how am I supposed to tackle that is the question.
all right. So talking about these advanced data structures, so the advanced data structures that you will come across that will be asked in interviews, you can say, or even competitive programming are just, in my experience, if you are concerned with trees, so these data structures are actually just segment trees, and the other concept is BIT trees or Fenwick trees. So these are the 2 types of trees that can help improve your optimization from n square to n log n. And a great source to learn those two. Okay, so AVL trees, people think that the concept is very difficult, and even people are not able to understand what AVL trees are. So you may write about it in your exams, but you still don't know how to implement it practically. So the good thing about these AVL trees is that nobody asks these questions. Even interviewers know that even if you just know what an AVL tree is, it's a balanced BST. If you know just that is enough to the interviewer. they don't want you to code it, right? So you can just give up on ABI trees. Just know what the advantage of these trees are. No one will ask you that you have to solve questions on this. So the second thing is these segment trees and these Fenwick trees. So these are actually very interesting concepts, and the best way to learn these will be firstly GFG. So Geeks for Geeks has a great editorial on these concepts, both on Fenwick tree and segment trees. There is a great explanation of how, so there's a great graphic representation of how these trees are actually formed, how the solutions are stored in the segments, and how you can build the tree, and then how you can make the updates and fetch the answers for the queries. So these two trees, so I'll say firstly go to Geeks for Geeks, look at these concepts, and try to, so many people just read the concepts and they don't go and implement the concepts themselves. So even I did this once. I read what segment trees are, but I did not implement them, and the next time I saw the question on segment trees, I was not able to solve them. So what you need to do is actually go ahead, understand the concept, then implement segment trees 2 to 3 times yourself. Just a simple segment tree like finding the sum of numbers from 1 to n. So let's say you have n numbers and you get a query to solve the sum for L to R. So you have to take out that sum. So try to solve this question 3 to 4 times using segment trees on your own. And even for Fenwick trees, so Fenwick trees is another optimization from n square to n log n using the concept of, you can say, binary or the numbers. So even for that, you can use this example of finding the number, finding the sum from L to R. So try to implement that 3 to 4 times. After that, Geeks for Geeks actually has a good set of questions, like 2 to 3 questions on each of these topics. And the beauty of these topics are that both of them perform the same optimization from n square to n log n using just trees by pre-computing sums in ranges. So you can use the concept of Fenwick trees and segment trees on the same kind of question. So go to Geeks for Geeks, try to implement them yourselves once, then try to solve those 3 to 4 questions using both these approaches. So that's the best way to learn these advanced DS. Now coming to your question of logic-based logic building. So, so there is a hack to these questions. So in all the interviews that I have given, or from the experience of my friends, there is a set of questions that is asked in all these interviews. So logic building questions are asked by companies just to get a basic understanding of how you think of, or you are able to think. That is not the primary concern. Mostly they judge you on the basis of your competitive programming round. So you can go to Geeks for Geeks again. There's a section for quizzes, and in that you will see that there are 100 puzzles that are asked, and they are solved, basically 100 solved puzzles. So these 100 puzzles are like the set frame from which the companies like Uber, Microsoft, Amazon, even Google to some extent, they pick the questions from one of those 100 questions only. Because what happens is, although these questions are compiled and available on sites like GFG, interviewees don't actually go to these websites. Either they don't know about them, or they ignore the quiz section. So if you just go to the quiz section, go through those 100, you will be able to build your logic on the basis of how these companies want to ask logic-based questions. So you can actually extrapolate the logic from those questions onto maybe another question if by surprise these companies ask. Otherwise, those 100 questions are enough.
Yeah, Rohit, go ahead.
Hello, sir. This is Rohit.
Hi, Rohit.
Yeah, sir. In some exams like Microsoft and CodeVita, even though we compile entire program and we are able to pass the sample test cases, we end up with runtime errors like time complexations. Like we are unable, even though if we write some optimized code, also we end up with some test cases not passed. So how can we overcome this problem?
Okay, so one thing, I think this is another hack that I'm telling you guys. So this is not the best way to go in these interviews, but it is one way to make it through the programming round. So you have up to 100 questions in these rounds, 100 people participating in these rounds, and just 2 to 3 questions. So what often happens is that these questions are so difficult that none of you are able to solve it, or a handful of people are able to solve it. But what is interesting is that they have only like 5 to 6 test cases for these difficult problems, or maybe even 10. and they have actually given you two to three questions as samples, right? So they actually tell you that these are the sample questions, and they even give you the answer for those. So this is a hack that you can actually, if you can't solve a question, and so what you can do is try to solve the question on your own, try to pass whatever test cases you can. Then there may be an issue with not being able to pass even one case, or there's some issue that you're running to, maybe you don't have time, then hard code those cases. So I've seen people in my college, there was an interview going on, they hard coded the solution for, we were interviewing for Uber, and there were three questions, no one was able to pass the questions, they were really difficult to solve in the time frame that we had to solve three questions in 1 hour. So a girl, what she did was that she hard coded the solution for the three problems. Although people solved the first problem, she solved only a sample test case. For the other two problems, she solved two test cases each, while others could not solve anything. So the sheet, the compilation that comes to the team is just how many question was one candidate able to solve, or how much was the score. They don't get the complete information about how those questions were solved. So despite not being very smart in that scenario, she was able to crack that round and go ahead, and she even backed the offer from Uber. So these are the hacks that you can use. You should obviously avoid them, but these are hacks. Since you're sitting for an interview, it's a competitive environment. You should do everything that you can to get to the next round. So that's one thing. But now coming to your primary question, what to do when you run into runtime errors or some other errors that you're facing? So the approach to these questions will firstly be, if you are running into a runtime error, it's obviously somewhere due to either, so the two primary issues that happen because of which you run into errors is either that there's a division by zero error. So that's easy to spot, right? If you're doing some division somewhere, go ahead, see in your code if there is anywhere a denominator can be zero. So that's an easy issue to find. The other is when you try to access memory that is not within your range. So that is the primary issue that you get for segmentation errors. That is the primary reason. So in that case, the best thing that you can do is actually try to go to the question. If basically when these issues happen, it's usually a DP question, something like that. What you can do is, when you have a loop or when the function is being called, at the top of that function, print all the variables, print the state. So if you had x, y, z, true, false, whatever there was, try to print it on the top. So what will happen is, although you will get a wrong answer, so you will see that there is, so you can see some information as to up to which level the processing was able to complete. So when you then you can go ahead and go to your, let's say, notebook and see at which stage the question got stuck, and then you know that okay, this was the state where the question got stuck, this is the area where the issue occurred. So now that you have the exact area where the code got stuck, you can basically dry run that particular test case or that particular scenario on the paper, and you will easily be able to find out why the issue come. So that's how I do debugging, and that's a great way to come across to solve these debugging issues.
Yeah, Adarsh, go ahead.
Good evening, Arno.
Adarsh, be loud. Your voice is not audible.
Good evening, Arno. This is Adarsh here.
Hi, Adarsh.
I wanted to know that how much this internship would matter in while sitting for a product-based company's interview.
Okay, so that's rather interesting. So actually, it does not matter. So what matters is that you. So firstly, at least getting an internship is important. If you had an internship, it shows the company that you did something meaningful in your summer break. But the companies don't pay that much importance to the internship that you did. It's just a part of your resume where the interviewer can make questions from. Otherwise, these internships only matter if you need to get a job in a company and the internship has been done or completed in that very company. In that case, internships help. Otherwise, interviewers don't really focus on your internships. I've seen people who went into Expedia, that's a company that's based in Gurgaon right now, and from that they went into Google. And similarly, even I was in Visa, from that going into CureFit. So no one asked about my internship, or even people went from small companies, they were not able to get good internships, they went into Amazon and Microsoft from campus. So internships are not really that important for getting into product-based companies. What is important is being able to. So I think this is something important that we should have discussed earlier as well. So two things are important. One is being able to solve that question that is asked. So for that, competitive programming or Geeks for Geeks and LeetCode, all that. The other thing that is important is having projects on your resume. So what people do is they write a simple Sudoku solver or a simple crossword solver on their projects, and that is not at all enticing or interesting to the interviewer. Anyone can write these basic codes and put them on GitHub. So what you need to do is do something interesting, like make an Android application, make a website which can maybe change images, which can maybe modify pixels. You can find colors in images, even something simple, not a calculator, but something simple. Working with some audio, working with some video, anything like that. If you can do something practical, that is what grasps the attention of the interviewer, and that is I think that's what helps getting into product based companies. So they want to see, although you have implemented the project, what was your understanding of the project, what you learned from the project, and did you really understand what were the fundamentals of the concepts that you were applying, and did you really learn from what you were doing, or just it was done just for the sake of it. So having those good projects on your resume and a good background about programming, that's what's important. Your internships really don't matter that much. Having one is good, but they don't really matter that much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mohit, take over.
Okay, fine. So yeah, thanks, Arnav. Like, thanks for the session as well as for giving your insights
Thanks
about
so much,
competitive
guys, for
coding and
having
all.
us.
And yeah, so yep. Do you want to say something more or something?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Mohit, and thanks to your faculty members and to your team for inviting me for this session. It was really great, and I had a lot of fun talking to the students there. They had really good and insightful questions. And guys, thank you so much for being part of this lecture. And I hope you guys were able to learn something new, something interesting. And I wish all of you guys a very best of luck.
Definitely.